I'm Ken.
And I'm Yasmine.
And this is Conversations with Ken and Yasmine.
And this has been, even though we weren't aware of it, I guess this has been in the works for 27 years, almost 28,
27, almost in August, it'll be 28. This has
28 years of friendship, of deep
yes,
friendship
right,
and artistic collaboration and
yes,
creativity and support.
right.
Ken is probably my dearest friend in the world, and we've been dear friends for 28 years, and he's directed my plays and has directed the West Coast premieres of my plays, and we're at this point in time where this is the next step of our creative collaboration.
Like in the midst of everything that's happening, where will art be in the future?
And as we're observing and participating in the movements right now, we felt that this platform would be an ideal way to express our thoughts and observations of what we are seeing with the Black Lives Movement, with peace, equality, justice, the future of art and education within the lens of these movements as well.
And it also gives us an excuse to actually talk to each other and see each other at the same time.
That's right.
Excuse, you're just getting a view into what it's like to hang out with us from, 2,000 miles away.
Right. So we're on two different coasts, West Coast and
Yes.
East Coast.
Yes.
Two different time zones, but here we are, and this is an extraordinary time in our history.
Yes.
And I think you
Definitely.
concur.
Working in education and knowing that what I was doing before and understanding kind of the land that we're living in now, there's always a big question mark of what the future holds, and not really being able to predict this as a step in which it would cause this much reflection.
Starting with COVID, indeed had its deep traces in discussion of race, of class, of socioeconomics.
Yes.
Now into Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, police reform. As an educator as well, Ken and I are not only, Ken, we're not just, artists, playwrights, directors, writers. We're also educators, and we've been educators our whole professional lives. And so we're also considering for our students how this will influence their futures as well.
With us both being people of color, understanding how the society works towards creating these boundaries that now the people have to really truly have to deal with in this moment. People are feeling uncomfortable with the thoughts and ideas that they've had because now they can only be confronted by them because there's nothing to distract them from their own personal feelings and emotions that they probably have not dealt with their whole entire life.
And I think it started with a political conversation the last election, and then has just kind of built up into this point in our conversations with people that we deal with on a daily basis, friends, colleagues. And here we are at this moment where the conversation, I think, is getting deeper and deeper and riskier, and where people's feelings, and you alluded to that before, people's feelings are raw, are present. And how do we receive that? And what do we do with those feelings? What can we do with that?
What happened when the pandemic actually started hitting the city? And I know for Los Angeles, it was one of those things where San Francisco was the first city to kind of put everybody in lockdown. And then it started moving throughout the state. And then I was constantly countering people who would try and find reasons to justify their inability to want to do some basic thing of like wear the mask, wash their hands.
Also living in the epicenter of the virus in the early epicenter in the United States, the lack of empathy that really amazed me, where, as you just said, of the discussion of wearing a mask, of social distancing. Where's the empathy when we saw thousands and thousands of people die? Americans die. People die right here in this country, and I don't understand that. And that conversation needed to be had as well. And it really, it's raw.
All you have to really admit to is that your comfort, your personal comfort, is more important than other people's lives. If you can't say it that simply, saying, I don't care about other people, I want to go back to living the way that I want to live. Don't give excuses of what you believe because you don't know anything, because you're not a doctor, you're not a scientist, you're not this. You're basically saying that what I need to do, the reason that I've created all this wealth to be separated from all these other people that I can no longer enjoy because of these masks, I should be allowed to do that and screw everybody else.
Well, also that goes into the socioeconomic divide that this virus has really, I mean, we always knew we had it,
Right.
but now we really, you know, it's very blatant, especially when you
Yes.
saw people who had the option of working remotely and those who had no option, who were on the front line in service industries, first responders as well, who
Right.
were putting themselves out there. And that divide was very clear in seeing who was able to make those choices. Well, I don't have to wear a mask because I'm home in my community and everyone I'm around is working from home as well, versus people who still had to get on the subways every day, who
Right.
had to take public transport, who had to be out there.
Yes, and forcing people now that are basically that are considered essential workers that basically have, you know, minimum wage jobs, and having them try to enforce a mask rule by people who don't want to follow it, where they're already putting themselves in a dangerous situation because they're essential workers, possibly, you know, being surrounded by COVID in any shape, size, or form. So it's this constant thing about the open holes that American capitalism that's always existed in American capitalism, has now been completely exposed.
Yes.
And now people don't know what to do with it except for to try and go back to those creature comforts that made them feel comfortable in the first place. People have time to find the space to justify how they feel, no matter how wrong it is.
Oh, without a lack of empathy or without foresight, without any connection to the other. And that
Right.
division really was very clear because there wasn't even an attempt to empathize with the other who is out there on the front lines, who is out there as an essential worker, who has to or had no choice in continuing to work outside the home during this time. That also in our conversations together throughout these months especially led us to this moment where we wanted to examine that and to really talk about it.
Out here in Los Angeles, as things slowly started to shut down and then instantly shut down, and knowing what it was like just to talk to people. I mean, the different conversations between I had, you know, the average guy that's walking down the street versus, you know, the nurse that I would talk to. They'd be telling me specific details about how many patients they had coming in that had COVID. Knowing the randomness of it, about one nurse that I was talking to said they had a 27-year-old kid that came in and died within a couple of days, and had a 91-year-old man that had health issues that survived.
This all began with misinformation from the beginning, with ill preparation or no preparation and misinformation. But what you said before also is it really brings us to this moment that because of these lack of distractions and now this movement, people are focused on what's happening in a very deep way. We're looking at the word essential, and I think that word in our vocabulary is very present because we looked at essential workers, essential work, non-essential, and I think we're cutting out what's really unessential and being sort of manipulated by celebrity, by hype, by what's really not essential, and really focusing on what's meaningful right now: change, social justice, equality.
Yes, I think that
of COVID, as a result of what's been happening with COVID and living in a COVID world. I'm not going to say post-COVID world because we're still living in a COVID world.
They're talking about the second phase where none of us we've really gotten out of the first one. Conscious is where the money is. That's what it feels like right now. I understand, you know, the idea of a capitalistic society and what's going on in most people's heads, but on one level, if you don't have consumers to buy your stuff, how do you profit?
Well, yeah, that's true as well. But I think what consumers will purchase is going to be very different. I mean, I think the whole trajectory is going to be very different from now on going forward.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
I want to ask your opinion. Why is it that some people have trouble saying Black Lives Matter? They respond by saying all lives matter. Why do you
Be-
think that's a problem for some
be-
people to say Black Lives Matter?
it's a problem for some people to say because they hear the word only in their head. They've
Mm,
always heard the word only. It's just kind of the idea of accepting that Black Lives Matter. You also have to admit to your own inherent racism because of the fact that you've got to separate the idea of Black lives.
mm,
So when people say Black Lives Matter, if I say Black Lives Matter and somebody says all lives matter, it's like, no, you don't think that.
mm,
Because you can't say
mm,
Black Lives Matter. You're basically saying that you don't have the ability to see me as an individual
mhm.
and as an individual group of people that have dealt with all this trauma and violence against them. And you want to brush that off because all lives matter makes you feel comfortable.
And within that conversation, you had raised in our conversations before about all Black Lives Matter.
You cannot take away the idea of where a lot of the media is focused in on the lives of mainly Black men that have been violently taken away by police, and then moving towards Black women like Breonna Taylor and Sandra Bland.
Andrew Bland.
But then Black trans lives have been completely almost erased from the media completely. And that's why I think it was beautiful during Pride Week that they have a mural in front of the Dolby Theater where they hold the Oscars, which says all Black Lives Matter. We're not a monolith. We are a group of people whose culture is rich and basically embraced this world despite how it's treated us, and it's been taken away and people have made profit off of it, but still that resilience that we have as a people to continue to move forward in this time. And that covers all of us.
And that's why
there's
it's important to have people that one can identify with.
yes.
And if you don't identify, you always look at someone as the other.
Right.
There's always that wall, that divide. And this is how we can discuss media, what we see in film, in
Right.
magazines, who we see as our teachers.
It's like the idea of the artists that Microsoft had wanted to paint a mural in front of their building, the Black Lives Matter mural, and then put in the actual letter, while this is still relevant.
While it's still relevant.
As egregious as that is, it's hard not to think that's how most of corporate America thinks.
Right.
It's basically, how can I make some type of profit off of this moment so people will feel and believe that we care? And I'm saying that some of them probably do care.
Right.
But at this moment in time, like the amount of floundering that you see from all these corporations about what to do, statements that are being released, the fact that I can't believe now that they want to completely remove Aunt Jemima, just completely take that image away and now say that they didn't think it was racist, where from the time it was created, from the kerchief, that they removed the kerchief and then they gave her a perm. And now, so why did you make all these changes if you didn't think this image was problematic or racist? You've been constantly making tweaks to these throughout the whole years that you've had these products. So now you're trying to basically say, look what we're doing.
Right.
Please buy our product. Rather than when in the 80s, when you gave Aunt Jemima a perm, what were you thinking? You didn't think it was racist then? So what's the actual issue? Mrs. Butterworth, same thing. For people to go like, oh, I did not know it was racist. Now it's like, no, what you're trying to do is make a profit.
But you and I have to remember that we're writers, we're storytellers,
Right.
you're a screenwriter and a playwright. I'm a playwright and an essayist. You write poems and you write comedy and it's all about telling people stories.
Right.
And if you don't tell people stories and tell the stories of all people,
Right.
Tell their stories, there's going to be that divide where people don't know the other. And we won't have that word, the other.
Right.
So that's also an issue where people say they're going to take responsibility and they have a hashtag and they put something on Twitter, and they do so, put something on their Instagram for one day, but where's the action? Where are you to have African American stories and actors and producers and directors? I mean, we need to see more of it all the time, as well as Asian American stories, Latina stories. Also, that has to be very clear. Trans stories.
When you stop thinking of people as from the perspective of the other for profit, then you're actually able to embrace the stories that exist. That's why the whole I Take Responsibility campaign was just such a head scratcher for me.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
There wasn't a single television executive, movie executive, the people that have the power to actually change these images in the campaign. And I thought it was a nice little sweet button that people could kind of think to look at and go like, oh, well, they're doing something. But if you're not in the power position to really do that much when it comes to Hollywood, it just fell flat in so many different levels.
And it's reminding me of right now we have, wonderful theater that's streaming right now, for free. It's great of companies to provide that to people, that we can still have art in our lives. But I find it very interesting where this week and last week you would have the artistic director or the director make a statement about Black Lives Matter and about equality and justice, and then you would have the show start it from a recording of a production they had, and there wasn't one actor of color in that production.
Right.
So
completely.
So where is it? What is this? It's just something to make someone feel better for 5 minutes that, okay, I took responsibility. Okay, I'm a participant in this movement, but there's no action.
There's no action behind it. I mean, that's Broadway, it was called the Great White Way, not just because of the lights.
That goes back to our time where we met as graduate students, nearly 28 years ago.
Yeah.
And thinking about what you and I have discussed all the time, when at that time, which was very different from this time, but this time still has a ways to go as well. You had professors and people in power who did not get your story. They didn't get, didn't get my name, didn't get your story, and could not relate to that story, and therefore wouldn't shepherd that story.
Luckily, I know for me, because I was working at La Mama ETC while I was in undergrad. So when I was in grad school, having actual professionals, theater professionals outside of NYU, they kind of took me under their wing and really allowed me to take my passion and let it, flourish. Allowed me to, when I was in just school, I would just do the work I needed to do, and the professors that I knew would really push me or were willing to dig into the humanity of what I was writing about, I would focus on them. And then I would go work.
At that time, I was very trusting. I had no experience in a school that size. And I was very honest as a writer. I mean, I guess I was green. I was 17, 18 years old when I started. So very green as a writer, very new, but very trusting. And it was amazing because a lot of people you would wonder, why can't you get what I'm saying? It was so different from, I guess, what they would envision as something being marketable or good or relatable. And how you and I had this discussion about missed opportunities. So many artists, actors, directors, writers who have had years of missed opportunities, but we created our own, and that's another story.
Well, it was
but because of that, because it wasn't relatable, people didn't get it because the people in power
weren't willing to put it behind it because they didn't see the profitability in it. It was kind of like, I remember, I'm not sure if you remember this, when we were at that symposium with the soap opera writers, producers.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And I started asking the questions about basically, laid out the history of soap operas and basically asking about stories of people of color and how could they promote them, knowing that the ad money coming in was not so much calling for that. Like, how could they focus on a story about people of color if the people that were actually putting money behind it didn't support these stories. And well, it's not about that. It's about the artistry. It's like, no, it's about that. If people aren't going to put money into your artistic endeavor because you're promoting a story that might offend the people in the Midwest, because there might be like an interracial relationship or something like that, then how can you actually focus on these stories? You can't tell me that it's all about the art.
I saw that my year working on a soap opera for my Writers Guild credits. I did see that. But I want to get back to, you brought up someone very dear. You brought up Ellen Stewart of La Mama, and I know you had your La Mama experience. I had my La Mama experience. La Mama, ETC in New York, wonderful theater under Ellen Stewart.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to La Mama ETC Experimental Theater Club, dedicated to the playwright and all aspects of the theater.
She knew how to put all these artists, writers, actors, directors, puppeteers, costume designers, lighting designers, people of such diversity, and it was effortless. And she not only did it effortlessly from that perspective, she also had a tremendous, very loyal audience.
Yes.
Would subscribe to those stories. And my relationship with her, and having George Ferrens direct The War Zone Is My Bed and shepherd a lot of my plays, returning Jasmine Spring, all through that process, because she gave me an opportunity and wanted my stories to be told. And she knew how to do it. And I wish we could, if theaters and films companies today want to model, look at her model.
Because one thing I can say about Ellen is it was always nice to, since I worked there in the archives, having moments of her calling me into her office so we could talk about the slate of plays that are going in, and having like Edward Albee show up or Sam Shepard show up. And
you and I are both in the archives now.
Yes.
That to me
that's
is
amazing.
That we are in the La Mama archives. That to me is a tremendous honor. But that's what they need to look at as a model for someone who's able to bring all the stories together and really produce these stories and get an audience.
See, is championing the artist for the sake of the artist rather than the sake of the box office.
Yeah.
Because the way that it was run was in such a way that she could take risks.
Right.
She could take risk, and everybody that worked there at the time had basically created a theater in which you could, and known also that it was an experimental theater, that you could take a lot more other risks and other things to do.
Yeah.
And that's what I really enjoyed about that, because I think the breadth of my theater experience, from the complete absurd to the esoteric that I witnessed as I was a videographer down there, was amazing. I mean, I've got stories that have locked into my head that I videotaped, that I can still find pieces of when I'm working on other work for myself, that allows me to go in different areas and different perspectives and being able to flip things around and look at it from a different angle, mainly because of that experience at La Mama.
And we could say today, undergraduates, graduate students, young, starting out, new writers and artists, where do they go for that? They don't have a venue like Ellen Stewart's La Mama anymore. No. They don't have, we don't have an Ellen anymore. But for our next show next month, we are going to talk about live theater, live art in a COVID world, and other platforms that people are using. And we are going to speak with a director in Israel who is going to talk about what his company is doing. So as you had said before about distractions and what's essential and unessential, I think now what's happening is that people are creating their own means of expressing their stories through different multimedia platforms to get their stories out.
Yes.
Because it's the time and the space to do it. And people are being very creative at this moment. And that's something that we see as a result.
And that's one of those things with Ellen, the way that she championed the artist is the same thing, same way that I felt about L. Kenneth Richardson, who was the co-creator of the Crossroads Theater, who had created the Blacksmiths Playwriting Fellowship out here at the Mark Taper Forum in Los Angeles that I was a member of.
You know, we want to try to explore as many of those as possible. You know, whether it be drama, whether it be a play like For Colored Girls, whether it be something from South Africa or something from the West Indies. We just want to do as much about the Black experience as we can.
He just passed away about a month ago. And knowing the way that Lee would fight for his writers and the way that he would push his writers to really try and find the core of what they wanted to say.
Right.
And as an African-American man, he'd really push you. I mean, there were points in times Lee and I, we get into these shouting matches where it looks like we might physically go after each other. Then we would laugh and go get a beer and just hang out. But he taught me how to fight for what I believed in, and this understanding what I wanted to say first was key. It's hard to fight for a concept,
Right.
but you can fight for a specific idea, and knowing that I had to nail that down before I could do anything. And he really, really pushed every button that I had to push me towards a level of excellence that I was not able to see at the beginning. And it's kind of like shedding off all of those blocks that we put on ourselves to tell each other that, well, what I'm saying might not be worthy. It's like rip that apart, because unless you say it, you won't ever know.
A commonality, as I listened to your story with Crossroads and Ellen as well, is the accessibility these artistic directors had and offered to people. Because someone asked me, how did you formulate your relationship with Ellen Stewart and La Mama? I wrote her a letter. She didn't know who I was. I didn't know anybody. I liked her story. I liked the history of La Mama, and I thought maybe my stories would be accepted, would be understood by her and by her company. I simply wrote her a snail mail, not email. This is really, I'm really dating myself. A snail mail letter in a package with a play, mailed it to her, and she responded. So I think looking at people we've admired,
yes,
it's important for young students, young people to have mentors or teachers or people who they can look up to, who can connect, who can relate to their stories as well.
People that are willing to open up and listen to the stories that they want to tell.
Yeah.
I know for L. Kenneth Richardson, while I was at the Blacksmith's Playwriting Fellowship, I was still teaching screenwriting at USC. And I know what he gave to me as a mentor and then moving into a friend was the ability to teach my students of color what to fight for, and also gave them a realistic understanding of what they needed to do when they go into a meeting with producers. A Caucasian professor teaching this to a student is not going to have the experience of having somebody say something racist in the meeting and not be able to react to it. It's one of those things about making sure that my students of color did instantly gravitate towards that was racist. Let me correct you on your racism before the deal was done. There are ways that you could point out the racism in such a way where they have to go, oh, either you get where I'm coming from, you understand what I'm doing, or I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's very, you can see how this conversation can make someone very uneasy. But it's
not even that.
It's necessary, and we have to have this conversation. I can understand how this is hard work. It's work, and we have to keep doing it. We have to be brave enough to put our thoughts out there and our emotions and conversations out there to have this dialogue, because I think that's when healing and change will come. If we don't talk about it, nothing will change.
And it's not going to be something that's going to be quick. And I think right now a lot of what I see, at least in the media, are people trying to look for a quick fix and a quick answer. And
Ken, our conversation, our dialogue right now today, starting this program, it took 28 years and
Right.
so many events.
Well, it took 28 years for us to
this
share
point
it with
that
other people.
To share it with other people. We've
Yeah,
always
'cause-
privately.
we've always had these conversations.
Always had this, but to
Yeah.
publicly come out there publicly and have this dialogue, it took time. I'm so grateful that we've been working together all these years and continue to do so. And
I can't wait to sink my teeth into some of the stuff we've been talking about before, but that's for another show.
No, and I'm so glad that we're also not only artists but educators who have lived at our professional lives, teaching students and to work with young people and to really respect their stories and encourage them to express their stories.
Allowing them to have the strength to find the truth of what they want to say without doing it through the guise of what they think people want them to say.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Goodbye, my friend.
Well, this was fun. Goodbye. And we'll find a way
next time.
What was it?
You know what?
Why do we do this?
Forget goodbye. I like until next time. How about let me do another
Until
one.
next time.
Until next time.
Okay.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah, but we can do that at the end.